Hey, welcome to I'm Right with Jesse Kelly. I'm Mike Slater filling in. I'm fired up. I know you are too. I know Jesse is. He can't wait to get back. I can't wait to hear from him as well. But we have plenty of fallout still on just the insanity that happened yesterday in New York City and across the country. Can't wait to talk about it with you next, right here on the First TV. Hey, welcome to I'm Right with Jesse Kelly. Mike Slater filling in one last time. Jesse will be back on Monday. Can't wait to hear what he has to say. We all know the news by now, of course. 34 counts guilty across the board. Unbelievable. What a time. What a time. Jesse's been calling it for a long time, too. I feel like it's one of my jobs is to provide some hope. That's what we do on my podcast. Try to do it in my radio show as well. Let's take a minute and do it now. On my podcast, Politics by Faith, we take the big news stories of the day, like the Trump trial, I'd say. And instead of just looking at it from the news political perspective, we broaden our perspective out a lot. And we try to find some biblical wisdom in it and some peace as well. And I'd like to do that here, if I may. I've been thinking a lot about something that Ben Carson said the other day on my show. It was the very last thing he said at the interview. Here it is. Are you prepared to go through again what the media and the left did to you, tried to do to you, the first go around?
Well, you know, my faith gets me through because I say, against the backdrop of eternity, what is a little inconvenience here, particularly when we have such a lofty goal at saving this country?
Yeah, that's the word. Eternity. Who cares? It's all about eternity. It's about standing up for what's right here and right now and doing that with eternity in mind. I think of why Trump is standing up against all this, right? He could be off playing golf. He could forget about all this drama, right? Be done with it. He was already president once, like whatever, just be done. And now the cynical view of why he's still in this is he's prideful, right? Of course, his ego's so big, he's prideful, he will never give up. Sure, fine. Either way, there's a lesson for all of us to stand up for what's right, no matter what. On Memorial Day, on my radio show, Breitbart News Daily on SiriusXM Patriot, and here on the First TV every weekday from 7 to 9 in the morning, we shared a story of a World War I soldier who wrote a note to his wife and his son. He's in the trenches, World War I. And he said to his wife, he said, the first prayer I want my son to learn to say for me is not, God, keep daddy safe. The first prayer I want my son to learn is, God, make daddy brave. And if he has hard things to do, make him strong to do them. Here's the key line. Life and death don't matter, my son. Right and wrong do. Daddy dead is daddy still, but daddy dishonored before God is something too awful for words. And I suppose you'd like to put in there a bit about safety too, and I know Mother would. We'll put it in afterwards, always afterwards. For it doesn't matter nearly as much. I love that. Safety doesn't matter. Life and death doesn't matter, my son. Right and wrong do. Now you can only have that, you can only say that and believe that's true if you have an eternal mindset. You know, one of the pop pseudo-psychology buzzwords going around the last few years is a growth mindset. And yeah, that's fine. But I'd like to one-up that idea with an eternal mindset. Many years ago, I first saw this from Francis Chan. He did this illustration, and it struck me ever since. He took a long rope across the length of the entire stage. That rope represents the timeline of your existence. It exists forever, for all of eternity. And right on the end of the rope, you see him talking about there, that little tiny part right there, that little red part, that little short red part of the rope, that's your time on earth. That's all you got. And the problem is, that's all we think about. That little red part. We get consumed by that red part. We work so hard here so that we can retire here. And Francis Chan's like, whoa, what about the millions and millions of years for all of eternity? And people will say, man, you're so stupid. The decisions you're making now the decisions you're making here are really going to affect here poorly. And he's like, man, you're so stupid because the decisions you're making here are going to affect you for all of eternity. And you don't pay any mind to that. I randomly read this morning, 2 Corinthians 4:17, for this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. Politics is a thing that's seen, by the way, but there are things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Now, when I say that this time in the red, that red part of the rope, when I say it's short, that doesn't mean we just go waste it because it's meaningless. No. It's great meaning. But its meaning is for the sake of eternity. And you only have one shot at that short little red part of the rope. You can't go back. You got one try. So get it right. We got to live it right. And by live right, I mean, as Paul said, walk in a way that is worthy of the gospel. We talked about this on my podcast yesterday, what it means to live worthy. That word worthy, you know those scales, like the justice, like the symbol of justice is Lady Justice with a blindfold because justice is blind. And then it's those two scales, you know, like this, like those two scales. That's what that word, the Greek word worthy, axios, it's in reference to those scales. So it has a tie into justice, which is what we're not seeing with this Trump trial. But anyway, that was yesterday's episode of Politics by Faith, the podcast. My focus here on Jesse Kelly's show is to set our minds to eternity. And let's get refocused on eternity. What does that do? It gets you out of your head. It gets you out of the moment, doesn't it, right? We're so stressed, we're so anxious, we're so overwhelmed. And one of the main reasons why is because we're not thinking about eternity. I said, okay, so that's fine. It's all great, right? Good coping mechanism you came up with. But if we focus on eternity now, what are we to think about life on earth right now? What do we do when we're right here right now? It's very simple. Just stand up for what's right. That's it. Don't worry about persecution. Don't worry about earthly consequences. It's light and momentary. You know this goofy story about Sam Alito and his appeal to heaven flag that flew outside of his house? This goofy made-up controversy. Oh no, a Supreme Court justice flew a 250-year-old flag outside of his house, which, by the way, has also been flown outside the San Francisco City Hall since 1964, but all of a sudden is a sign of racism or something, right? But that appeal to heaven flag, or that line, that appeal to heaven line, comes from John Locke. He wrote it in 2 treatises of government from 1689. And among other things, that's the San Francisco City Hall. Among other things, John Locke said, "What is my remedy against a robber that broke into my house?" Well, okay, we appeal to the law for justice. But perhaps justice is denied, or I'm crippled and I cannot stir. I mean, I can't move. Robbed and have not the means to do it. If God has taken away all means of seeking remedy, there's nothing left but patience. He goes on, but the conquered, meaning countries, of their children have no court, no arbiter on earth to appeal to. Then they may appeal, as Jephthah did, to heaven and repeat their appeal until they have recovered the native right of their ancestors. So the argument, that's where appeal to heaven comes from, John Locke. That's a terrible picture of John Locke. Are we able to throw that picture back? Geez, I feel bad for John. I feel like if John saw that picture, he'd be like, come on, guys. Really? My nose isn't that. It doesn't look like that, does it? The argument the colonists used from John Locke is that the British are attacking us. That's why they used that pine tree, right? There are a lot of trees here. They came, they were taking our trees, and we're not letting us use our own trees, right? They're attacking us. We have no UN, no United Nations to appeal to. There is no higher earthly authority. So we can only go to the highest authority. We can only appeal to heaven for what's right. And that's what John Locke was talking about. That's why he mentioned Jephthah. So Jephthah, real quick, the story is Judges 11 and 12. Jephthah was the son of a prostitute, and he was a mighty warrior. And he was kicked out of the community because of his mom. But when the Ammonites made war against Israel, the elders went back to Jephthah and begged him to come back and fight. And he said, "Did you not hate me and drive me out of my father's house? Why have you come to me now that you're in distress?" But he agreed to be their leader. And Jephthah, first thing he did, he tried to avoid war by sending a message to the enemy looking for peace, but they denied it. So they went to war, and God gave Israel the victory. But Jephthah appealed to heaven. My point of bringing this story up is when you don't know what to do in a situation, you should appeal to heaven and do what's right. Oh, but what about this? What about that? Life and death don't matter, my son. Right and wrong do. Anything bad that comes from doing the right thing is light and momentary. This is the mindset that can get you through anything the devil throws at you. I talked to a teacher the other day who refused to bow down to the trans mob at her school. It's a long story, but I think you know what I mean by that. And she didn't know what to do. She was getting all this advice. Oh, just do this, do that. Power, it doesn't matter. Just like let the boy change in the girls' room, right? And she was really struggling with what to do. And finally, she went away someplace quiet and she prayed. And she said, at that moment, it was so obvious what to do. She was on fire to do it. I love that. And maybe one day you'll have that opportunity to stand up and not give up. And people will look at you and they'll say, how is he doing that? How is he standing tall throughout all these lies that are being told against him? He's standing strong and he's not backing down. How is he doing it? And some people are going to say, oh, it's because he's prideful. Oh, it's because he has a huge ego. Or it's because you have an eternal mindset and you are on fire, no matter what, to do what's right. More coming up on I'm Right.
You're not stuck in your timeshare. You believe you are stuck in your timeshare because these timeshare companies are a bunch of big fat liars. What they do is, look, what they did to you, they do to everybody. They get you in with the fancy seminar, it looks good, and look at the beach house. And you like it, and I hope you did enjoy it, right? They can be so much fun. I hope you had a wonderful time, friends, family. But eventually, as they know, everyone's going to move on. You're done with it. Maybe you can't even afford it anymore with the way prices are with everything now. And so you let them know, hey, all right, I'm done. Y'all can have it back. And that's when they drop it on you. Have it back. Oh, sorry, it's yours for life. They don't let you out. Lone Star Transfer will get you out. They will legally and permanently get you out of that timeshare. Make one phone call, but not to the timeshare company. Stop wasting your breath. Call Lone Star Transfer. This family business will set you free. 844-310-2646. Lone Star Transfer.
Among the largest of these new groups, which you may have heard of, is Moms for Liberty. And its name does sound innocuous enough. Moms, great, sounds good. Liberty, awesome. Who doesn't like liberty? Moms for Liberty. As the mom of 2 young kids, that even sounds good to me. But it's vague enough that even some of its own members are pretty unclear as to what the group is really all about, what they're a part of. Because as benign as Moms for Liberty may sound, its agenda is unmistakably extreme.
Oh, I love it. This is so good. Let's not be fully distracted by Trump and all this other stuff. We need to know exactly not just what Moms for Liberty does, but what the DOJ has been doing to them. Great investigative reporter at the Daily Wire, Luke Rosiak, is here. Luke, how you doing, brother?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
What is the Moms for Liberty?
Moms for Liberty is just a group of center-right parents who are concerned about, making the schools left-wing indoctrination machines. They want it to go back to normal, where they teach you math and reading and science. And they're against things like transgender ideology and CRT and things like that.
They're so extreme. What you just said is so unbelievably extreme, Luke.
Yeah, they're just parents that think they should have some input into the places where their kids spend 6 hours a day. And so there's a unit within the Department of Justice called the Community Relations Service. And this is the part of the Department of Justice which is, quote, dedicated to preventing and responding to community tensions and hate crimes, bias, bullying, and discrimination. And so new documents that we've obtained through a lawsuit against the Department of Justice, we had to sue them to get these things. And the Daily Wire sued them along with attorneys from America First Legal. And we just got these documents that show that they were tracking Moms for Liberty alongside the Ku Klux Klan, the Oath Keepers, and then terms like noose, Confederate flag, and swastika. And this was really the only group, other than the KKK, the Oath Keepers, and a second white supremacist group, that was thrown in there, just casually throwing in there this group of ordinary moms.
Wow. Tell me, what is this Department of Justice group? What do they do normally?
So they're supposed to prevent hate crimes and respond to hate crimes, but then they also throw in their community tensions. So what happened here is, one of the things that happened from them tracking Moms for Liberty is this alert came up talking about how they were doing transgender policy in Virginia. Some of the conservative school districts were considering adopting a policy that said schools should not gender transition kids without their parents' consent. And Democrats didn't like that. They wanted the schools to be able to turn a boy into a girl and hide it from the parents. And so there's a very conservative district in rural Virginia where Republicans win with like 70%. And they were presumably going to adopt this policy that was supported by Governor Glenn Youngkin. And so the DOJ says, well, there's some tension around this because you have this Republicans who have a mandate of 70% of the vote, but then you have a couple of leftists who are causing trouble. And a couple of them actually went to a school board meeting and screamed and got detained by police for like disorderly conduct. And so if this were a conservative disrupting a school board meeting, they're arrested by police and the DOJ puts them on a terrorist watch list, basically. But when a leftist disrupts a school board meeting by potentially violating the law, the DOJ says, well, this just illustrates that there's community tensions and we're going to need the DOJ to come in and kind of mediate. And maybe we need to give in to these leftist activists so that they don't commit more crimes. That's a suggestion here, is the DOJ basically approached the conservative school board and asked them to basically cede their authority, because schools in America are run by local school boards. And they were basically pressuring these conservative school board members to defer to the DOJ in some capacity and let them work it out and solve it so there isn't all these tensions around transgenderism. But the only thing that can really mean is, instead of, in a democratic republic, we have elections and that's how we decide what kind of policy should go on in schools. They're basically saying if there's tensions, in other words, if leftist activists are causing trouble, then we need to have a mediation and we'll just kind of all sit down and split the difference.
Wow, that's amazing. That story is very different than what I thought. I thought you were going to say there was a liberal school board and conservatives came in and yelled in the microphone and went beyond their 60-second time limit. And that was the tension that the DOJ felt the need to come in and monitor. But it was the opposite. But the monitoring wasn't done on the lefties who caused the tension. It was done on the conservative board itself.
It's fascinating. It's like no matter what, the left is going to win because they call it either hate crimes or community tension. So it's kind of unclear. They either viewed the policy backed by Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin as itself hate, and therefore the DOJ could come in because someone's considering a parental rights thing that won't let kids be secretly gender transitioned. That's hate. The federal government needs to step in and stop this Republican governor from doing policies in his own state. Or it's tensions because left-wing activists are going crazy, in which case we also need to let the DOJ come in and do its thing because we want to diffuse tensions by giving in to the leftist activists.
Okay, you got 60 seconds. What does this mean that the DOJ is getting involved in even monitoring Moms for Liberty? What's the big picture concern about that?
Well, I mean, I think it leads to distrust in the federal government. I mean, this is a serious breach of trust, and it's also just kind of a waste of money. I mean, I got all these documents from this lady, and she's typing in like Google alerts for like N-word District of Columbia. And it's like, what, did you find that someone said the N-word in D.C.? Did you find that D.C. is secretly anti-black? What would you do if the DOJ found out that someone said the N-word in D.C.? So it's partly a story of incompetent bureaucrats who are just getting paid to sit around and really contribute nothing to society. And then on the flip side, when they do something that's not just a waste of time. It's kind of potentially this serious overstep where you're involved in the DOJ and you're thwarting local control of our schools and you're basically treating normal moms as, potentially domestic terrorists practically.
Yeah. Things used to be just a waste of money, and that was its own problem. But now the communists have taken over. It's much worse than that. Luke Rosiak, investigative reporter for the Daily Wire. Luke, keep up the great work, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Mike.
If I ever get the opportunity to fill in for Jesse again, we can tell the story in California where some conservative school boards tried to pass local laws school board policy that says teachers will tell parents if their kids are transitioning, and the state just came down and passed a bill that says, no, you can't do that. You must keep it a secret from parents. Unbelievable. Coming up next, we'll learn more about poop balloons from North Korea and metaphor alert about the pier in Gaza that's falling apart. That's next with the great Mike Baker right here on The First TV. I'm Right with Jesse Kelly, Mike Slater filling in.
I love coffee. I love it so much. And you know what does my heart well? It happened to me this morning. I was filling up my little coffee bean thing, and I was out. I thought, oh my gosh, am I out of blackout coffee? And I went and pulled open the freezer, and there's a big bag of blackout coffee beans waiting for me. That was the best. Blackout coffee is not only incredible coffee, they deliver it to my front door, amazing prices, and most importantly to me is they share my values. Blackout Coffee doesn't do it quietly either. Go look at their freaking merchandise, talking about America and God and guns. How many corporations in this country actually talk about that stuff anymore? Blackout Coffee does. I love them. I always will. It's the only place I get coffee from now. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/Jesse. What that does is it gets you 20% off your first order. blackoutcoffee.com/Jesse. All right?
Hey, welcome back to I'm Right with Jesse Kelly. Mike Slater filling in. Thanks for being here. Want to go right to the great Mike Baker, host of the President's Daily Brief. Also, the new PDB Situation Report airs Fridays, 10 o'clock, right here on The First TV. Mr. Baker, how do you do, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks very much, man. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you. We have a metaphor alert with the Gaza pier falling apart. I remember when Biden brought it up, I think it was at the State of the Union he first brought it up, this pier, and I was like, what? Like, who's it? Where did this idea even come from? And now the dang thing's falling apart. What's going on?
Yeah, it's look, we've done this before, right? I mean, I recall, not personally, but during D-Day, right? We had to build a lot of structures to offload and deliver materials to the beach. But this one is a little bit more problematic, right? The Mediterranean Sea, it's rougher, choppier, prone to more, difficult weather conditions at times. So you would like to have thought that the Corps of Engineers, and they're a terrific organization, so taking nothing away from them, this is just a massively difficult effort in a very, very hostile environment. So we've got about 1,000 personnel out there, military, contractors, others, trying to make this work in order to assist with the delivery of aid into Gaza. And it's, I don't know that they thought it completely through when they got it, because there was so much pressure on the Biden administration, particularly from their progressive base, to be seen as doing something. So they kind of leapt into the breach here. And I don't know that they really gave it a thorough, scrub before they started.
We're looking at here some Army vessels also beached ashore in Israel as well, and one service member is critically injured as well, a couple other injuries too. So it's a bit of a comedy of errors, unfortunately. But I want to ask you, because all right, so the first time I saw people talking about this, they were dunking on Biden. And you're like, okay, that's obvious. But then I was like, oh geez, like, should the Army Corps of Engineers be able to pull this off? Like, is this like a very, very common? And I'm like, no, maybe it is. Maybe the military advisors are like, this is a really, really bad idea, Joe. But Joe is like, no, we must do it. So I don't know where the blame goes. Like, should we be worried that they couldn't pull this off? The military couldn't pull this off? Or does most of the blame go to Joe for even demanding it be done?
Well, I think it's probably, it's not that the Army Corps of Engineers couldn't do it or can't do it. But again, it's given the environment. Look, they can't step foot on the beach in Gaza, right? So they are extremely limited in how they can operate around this. And it's a large structure that we're talking about, a massive floating base, right, with a causeway that attaches to the shore. The causeway is whatever, some 1,800 feet long, right? So, and it's got to be stabilized by vessels, by ships on either side of the causeway that are anchored, trying to stabilize this thing. And as you mentioned in the pictures, you can see some of these kind of floating off into the distance. And that's what happened. 4 of them broke off in rough conditions. and two of them floated, just kind of off towards Israel, eventually getting beached. And two of them ended up getting beached there in Gaza. The sailors couldn't get off because they're not allowed to step foot on the beach in Gaza. And so they were stranded on the ships. But I think the problem in part was the military is not going to say no, right? I mean, the military, you get your marching orders and bam, you go forward. You'd like to think the higher ups, the generals, Pentagon staff are saying, well, let's think through all the various scenarios. Let's really make sure this is the right thing to do. Let's yada, yada. But at the end of the day, the White House is insisting because, again, the Biden administration is feeling immense pressure. And you can see it every day in the way that they're trying to walk this fine line. Oh, we support Israel. Well, we're warning Israel. They better not do this, or we're withholding weapons and munitions. And, they're constantly talking out of both sides of their mouth because, on the one hand, they know, okay, well, we've got a portion of the population of the U.S. voters that want us to support Israel. And we've got this critically important portion of our Democrat voters that don't want us to support Israel. So they're in a very complex situation right now. And unfortunately, they're allowing their polling and surveys and worries about the vote to drive their interests and their foreign policy decisions.
That's right. $320 million wasted right there. And of course, all the aid ended up in Hamas's hands, of course. I want to jump over to Russia and Ukraine. Read the other day that France is putting some military advisors, Mike, on the ground. Not boots on the ground, not service, but military advisors. Is this just the latest escalation? We're going to keep going in this direction, eventually get maybe American service members on the ground there?
Yeah, look, military advisors on the ground is always sort of one of those initial steps on that slippery slope to more direct engagement. And Emmanuel Macron in France has been, he's been loading up on his testosterone because for the past month or so, he's really been banging we need to, do more to support Ukraine. We should be, getting in there. I can't say, he's mentioned that, NATO shouldn't, set aside the idea that perhaps NATO troops should be on the ground in Ukraine if things go bad in their efforts to push back the Russian offensive that's currently ongoing. So Macron has been leading that charge. He's even talked about the French nuclear arsenal possibly being, a factor in this at some point. And more so than anything else, right now, even more so, more of a worry than the, deployment of advisors is this strange tit for tat that's going on between Russia and NATO, some NATO allies, where it almost seems as if we're normalizing the idea of nuclear weapons at some point, tactical nuclear weapons in particular being used. And we're also seeing it elsewhere. We're seeing it with Iran. Iran, talking more about moving their nuclear, abilities from a civilian to a military footing. I mean, look, they've always been moving their way towards a military footing, so that's nonsense that they think, well, maybe we'll pivot. But the point being is you're getting more and more of this discussion out there in the public, and I think that's extremely dangerous. Right? We do not want to somehow normalize the idea of nukes. That's not a good place to be.
Yeah. Instead, we should start talking more about poop balloons, which is a word I never thought I'd ever say. North Korea floating these balloons that are carrying plastic bags full of filth and garbage, just landing on the streets of South Korea. Is this a prank? Or more than a prank? Like, should we do more than laugh at this? Like, what's happening here?
Thank God you and I are talking about this because I don't think a lot of other people are. So we've got this story locked down. Look, it is entertaining on the one hand, right? They basically set 260 upwards of 270 balloons from North Korea into South Korea, carrying massive bags of garbage and crap, right? Manure, and also it appears human feces. I never thought we'd be having this discussion. But they're doing it in part because in their minds, in Kim Jong-un's mind and his regime's minds, this is just tit for tat. It's retaliation for what the South regularly does, which is send balloons over into the North. But those balloons, rather than carrying garbage and crap, they carry leaflets and USB drives and other media that has information and news. And yes, it's propaganda, but they're trying to provide the North Korean citizens with information that they otherwise are never going to get because of the way that the regime in North Korea locks down on information control. So from the North's perspective, hey, we're doing the same thing. It's just that they don't have any leaflets or news of interest to send. So they're just bagging up garbage and crap and floating it down into South Korea in what they kind of view as a, hey, you do it to us, we're doing it to you.
Yeah, that's great. All they have is literal poop, literal crap to send.
Yeah,
to send.
There you go.
That's great.
Here's the best message. Oh, and by the way, the South also sends recordings of K-pop music. So maybe that's what really pissed off the North Korean regime. I don't know.
Yeah, this is their number one export now out of North Korea. Mike Baker, host of one of the top podcasts in the whole world right now, President's Daily Brief. Of course, go check it out. Mike, great to talk to you, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Man, what a day. What a time. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad Jesse Kelly is with us as well. He'll be back on Monday. I'm Mike Slater, Slater Radio on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me there. I'm right, Jesse Kelly on the First TV.
Sleep might be the most underrated thing in the world because it changes everything. It changes your entire life, your entire day. Haven't you gone through so many nights where you didn't get a good night's sleep, toss and turn and back hurt? Or even worse, this is what always got me, if you end up taking something to sleep, everything you take to sleep makes you feel like crap the next day. It's awful. You wake up in this fog, you never fully wake up. It's terrible. And then I found Dream Powder. What a name, right? Beam is the name of the company. They're wonderful. And they came up with Dream Powder. It's basically hot chocolate, but it's got all this natural stuff in it, melatonin and whatnot. And I drink it every single night before bed. And I knock out 8-9 hours, just beautiful sleep. But that's not the best part. The best part is the next day when I wake up. I don't wake up in a fog. I wake up feeling like $1,000,000. Go get some. Shopbeam.com/Jesse Kelly.
Hey, welcome back to I'm Right with Jesse Kelly. I, of course, am not Jesse Kelly. I'm Mike Slater filling in for Jesse. Today, I host Breitbart News Daily, which we simulcast right here on the First TV every weekday morning from 7 to 9. So join us bright and early tomorrow morning. One thing Jesse is honestly the best at is not getting distracted by what the media is telling you to focus on. But instead, he's excellent. He's always looking at the things that directly affect your life, the things that are most important. And there are a few things I would argue that are more directly important than your doctor. If you're on the medical operating table, that's supremely important. Have you heard about what's going on at UCLA Medical School? UCLA Med School used to be one of the best med schools in the country. But this is what communists do. They infiltrate and destroy. I've made the argument that woke people actually have a better sense of what's good, beautiful, and true than the average person because they need to seek out what is good, beautiful, and true in order to destroy it. Regular people may not realize what is good, beautiful, and true and what's essential, and they take these things for granted. But the woke, they see these things, and they hate them, and they infiltrate them, and they take them over, and they use them for power for as long as they can, and then they ultimately destroy them. Wokeness is a disease. It should be something that they teach how to treat and cure at med school, not something that spreads in med school. But anyway, UCLA Med School, they get 13,000 applications a year. Last year, they accepted 173 students. That's a 1.3% acceptance rate. I share that because they could accept the best, but they don't. Back in 2021, there was a black applicant whose grades and test scores were far below the UCLA average. But the dean of the admissions department, when the committee rejected that applicant, because obviously, the dean said, "Did you not know that African-American women are dying at a higher rate than everybody else? We need people like this in this medical school. We need more black doctors, even if it means accepting unqualified black doctors." Affirmative action is illegal in California. It's one of the few conservative things that still exist in California. Actually, there was a vote in 2020 to allow affirmative action, and it got voted down 57-42 by the people of California. It's illegal, affirmative action, but they get around it. They still do it at UCLA Med School. And there's been some whistleblowers. There's a report by the Free Beacon, the Washington Free Beacon. Race-based admissions have turned UCLA into a failed medical school. That's from one of the former members of the admissions committee who said, "We want racial diversity so badly, we're willing to cut corners to get it." They talked with 8 professors at the med school, other UCLA officials. How bad does it have to be for these otherwise progressive people at UCLA med school to come forward and speak out against what's happening at their school? How bad must it be? In some of the groups that this dean of the medical school admissions department has admitted, more than 50% of students failed standardized tests on emergency medicine, family medicine, internal medicine, and pediatrics. More than 50%. One professor said that a student in the operating room could not identify a major artery, and then, a classic woke victim mentality, berated the professor for putting her on the spot. Insert Jesse Kelly joke about putting her on the spot. Another professor said that students at the end of their clinical rotations don't know basic lab tests, and in some cases are unable to present patients. Presenting a patient just means here's their symptoms, here's what it could be, here's what a cure could be. Like, that's what a doctor does. And here we have these students unable to do it. One professor said that faculty are seeing a shocking decline in knowledge from our medical students. And of course, the double standard, right? All the normal criteria for getting into medical school, one professor said, or one admissions officer said, only apply to people of certain races. For other people, those criteria are disregarded. This dean of admissions, she also just happens to be the vice chair for equity, diversity, and inclusion of UCLA's anesthesiology department. And she routinely, this is according to people on the admissions committee, gives Black and Hispanic applicants a pass for subpar metrics, and Asians and white people need a near perfect score to even be considered. Check this out. One committee member says the bar for underrepresented minorities is, quote, as low as you could possibly imagine. As low as you could imagine. Amazing. One professor says she's lashed out at anyone who dare question the qualifications of minority students. This is from 5 different sources, who said that if you disagree with her decisions, then you are privileged and racist, and you have to do diversity training. There was a Native American applicant who they rejected, and this dean chewed out the committee and made them sit through a 2-hour lecture on Native American history delivered by her own sister. A little re-education happened. She said that 2 people backed up this story, that there was a highly qualified white male who was knocked down several spots because, as she said, quote, we have too many of his kind already. Ooh, his kind. She also told people who said, that's ridiculous, that you're not allowed to have an opinion because you're not BIPOC. That's Black, Indigenous, person of color. One professor says that UCLA still produces some good graduates, but a third to a half of the medical school is incredibly unqualified. Keep that in mind. Not a third to a half is like less than we would maybe like. No. Incredibly unqualified. 24% of students failed 3 or more of what they call shelf exams. So you do a clinical rotation and like pediatrics, and then you take a shelf exam about that. 24% have failed 3 or more. All right, so I'll tell you what's going to happen here. First of all, this is at UCLA Med School. We know, surely it's other med schools across the country, certainly across California. What they're going to do is they're going to lower the standards of the test. They did this when I was in high school. It used to be a 65 to pass the exam, and then it made it a 55. And oh gosh, golly, wouldn't you know, more people passed. We must be doing better in school. So they're going to lower what it takes to pass, and then eventually they're just going to get rid of the tests altogether. Just like they did with air traffic controllers. They got rid of the air traffic controller test to find out who would be the best at being an air traffic controller, and now we have planes running into each other on the runways and planes almost landing on top of each other on the runway. They turned that test for air traffic controllers into a questionnaire. What sports did you play in high school? What was your worst subject in school? I'm not kidding. One professor at UCLA said some students are accepted with GPAs so low they shouldn't even be applying. I'll end with this one. A reporter said, a faculty member said, I wouldn't normally talk to a reporter, but there's no way to stop this without embarrassing the medical school. It needs to be stopped. We're talking about our health. And listen, it's all pretend. This dean if her child was in the operating room, you'd think, and the best doctors coming, you'd be like, whoa, you're not Chicano. I need a Hispanic doctor. I need a Chicano doctor. Two other stories that also match this theme. We don't have time for it today, though, but just do a search for LA Times Killer King Hospital in Compton. That's the first DEI hospital a couple decades ago. And then search the name Patrick Chavis, Chavis, UC Davis. He's the original DEI doctor hire back in 1973. Maybe we'll share those another day if Jesse dare take another vacation. Here's the problem with this. I had a black man calling on my radio show today and saying, oh, Slater, so you don't think black people can become doctors? Quiet. It is a shame that med schools are lowering standards for people who look different, look certain ways, because now they have created, unfortunately, it is now rational to look at someone, to look at a doctor of a certain skin color and think, where'd you go to school again? UCLA? And I shouldn't be the one lamenting this. I mean, I do. I shouldn't be the only one. It should be black activists. There should be black activists who are demanding that UCLA only choose the best applicants. And there should be the black activists who are fighting K through 12 schools and demanding that they do better so they can get more qualified black applicants into the med schools, and they shouldn't have to lower the standards. This shouldn't be just on me. Listen, I just want the best. I don't care about color. But if you're obsessed with race and you want more black doctors, whatever, right? But they got to meet the standard. Right now at UCLA and surely other schools, they don't. And I feel terrible for the excellent black doctors because now they'll be judged as not qualified. It's not my fault. It's UCLA's. Now, can we embarrass the schools enough to get them to change their ways? I don't know. Marxists have no shame, so you can't shame them. Their goal is to destroy. The good people at UCLA Med School, they got to take power back now before it's too late. It might be too late already. But let's learn a lesson. If you see the Marxists taking over the places you love, you see the communists taking over the things you love, do not let the devil get a foothold. We'll end on a light note coming up next right here on I'm Right with Jesse Kelly, Mike Slater filling in, Slater Radio on Twitter and Instagram. Mike Slater filling in for Jesse Kelly. Now it's time to lighten the mood, and nothing lightens the mood more than dumb criminals.
Assistant Public Defender Natalie Tate for Mr. Harris, who should be present is due.
Mr. Harris, are you driving?
Actually, I'm pulling into my doctor's office, actually. So just give me 1 second. I'm parking right now.
All right. What are we doing?
Your Honor, we are respectfully requesting an adjournment in this matter, up possibly 2 to 4 weeks if the court would allow.
So maybe I don't understand something. This is a driving while license suspended?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And he was just driving. And he didn't have a license.
Is with the charges, Your Honor, yes.
No, I'm looking at
Yes.
his record. He doesn't have a license. He's suspended and he's just driving.
That is correct, Your Honor.
I don't even know why he would do that. So defendant's bond is revoked in this matter. Defendant is to turn himself into the Washington County Jail by 6 p.m. today. Failure to turn himself in will result in a bench warrant with no bond.
Hilarious. That's right. I never saw the end of that. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. I love when things are so astoundingly stupid. You're speechless. That judge is speechless. Good thing Jesse's never speechless. This is my last day filling in. Thank you, Jesse, for letting me fill in. Slater Radio on Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to join me over there, my podcast is Politics by Faith. You can download that. And I'll see you bright and early tomorrow. Right? I host Breitbart News Daily on SiriusXM. We simulcast that show right here on the First TV starting at 7 a.m. So we'll see you tomorrow morning. Have a great night.